Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Alan Schimmel, Editor-in-Chief, DevOps.com, and welcome to a special DevOps video chat today, sponsored by our friends at CA. And we're doing something a little different. Rather than the usual slide and pony show, we actually have two smiling, beautiful faces looking out at us. Hopefully you're seeing them all. On my monitor anyway, to my immediate right is Dr. Nicoles Forsgren, CEO and co-founder of Dora, DevOps Research and Assessment. And to Nicole's right is Catherine Q from CA. And we're here to talk today about an interesting new partnership between Dora and CA. And why, you'll find out why they did it and what it's all about. But before we do, let me just take a quick moment and remind our listeners, both Catherine and Nicole are really looking forward to questions today. And using our GoToWebinar control panel, you should see, and for most of you, that's in the top right corner of your browser or of your monitor. You should see a question or a section for questions. If you can hit the caret or arrow pointing down, you can see that you can put your questions in there. This is a very interactive, we hope it to be a very interactive panel, and we, rather than setting aside time for questions at the end, we're actually going to do questions throughout. So if you can pop your questions in there, we'll try to take them as they come in here. If we can, at least they're in queue and we will get to them as soon as possible. So please, guys, put your questions in there and we'll get them out to Nicole and Catherine, and hopefully we're going to have a great interactive video chat here today. Before we also start, let me just remind everyone, this is being recorded, so yes, you will be able to view it later on DevOps.com or on DevOps TV, our YouTube channel, and we welcome you to do that. So, with that being said, let's get busy. Dora. I think most people know CA Technologies, but they may not have heard of Dora yet. I have.
Sure.
But let's start off with, Nicole, what exactly is Dora for our audience out there?
So what is Dora? Dora is a joint venture with myself and Jean Kim, author of the Phoenix Project and DevOps Handbook and a few other things, and Jez Humble, also author of DevOps Handbook and Continuous Delivery and Lean Enterprise. And what we've done is, over the last several years, we have also been lead investigators on the State of DevOps reports, which we have co-presented with Puppet. And so what we've done is we've taken all of the amazing and fantastic things that we've found in terms of what really drives value to organizations when we're talking about what it means to deliver value with software, right? So what it means to deliver value in terms of speed and stability. And we've taken this and we've turned it into an assessment product so that we can really help organizations leverage this to develop capabilities and understand what it means to turn this into value for their own organizations.
Yeah.
They can benchmark it, they can benchmark it against the industry, and then they can identify their own bottlenecks so they can really accelerate their own transformations.
Excellent. And Nicole, I'm a layman compared to you, of course, but let me just, my understanding of what really gets me excited about Dora is, you're humble, but you guys have over 25,000, some are 26,000 survey responses over these last 5 or 6 years. So that baseline that you've built of organizations and what are high-performing IT teams, what are not, what are the characteristics that are indicative of success or not. Really, I mean, it's not subjective anymore. It's objective, based in fact, based in statistics, based in real math, right? In real, I mean, the body of knowledge is such that it's there, right? And now we can baseline your organization against this tremendous body of knowledge.
We have a lot of data, and I think the value behind what we've been able to discover is we've been able to take a research-based approach and an evidence-based approach so that we can really say, you know, what appears in our assessment only has stuck around, only stays in the assessment because we know that we can say that it statistically drives improvement in real meaningful ways. Right? It's not there because it sounds nice and it looks nice, and we think it works in a couple different places. It's here because it's been shown to statistically drive improvement across thousands of different organizations, in tens of thousands of data points across dozens of industries around the world.
Excellent, Catherine. Let me, if I can, turn to. It's not Catherine. What am I saying?
Yeah, it's Catherine.
It is. I had a little senior moment there. I apologize. But Catherine, talk to us. Why is this important to CA? What got CA saying, "Hey, we want to partner with Dora because there's something here"?
So first of all, you know, who wouldn't want to partner with an organization led by such senior and talented DevOps experts and industry leaders like Nicole and Jean and Jez? They've been leaders in the DevOps movement, pretty much, you know, almost founding members of the DevOps movement, if there was such a thing. The other thing that was really attracted myself as well as CA to the Dora assessment is that it is so comprehensive. So many of the other maturity models or assessments out there really only focus on a particular part of the DevOps chain and forget the ops feedback loops, as well as the cultural aspects and the process aspects. And so looking at Dora, it is much broader in its perspective and what it looks at, as well as it takes a capability-based view rather than maturity-based view. And for me, that was really crucial.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it goes back to something that I kind of skipped over, and I apologize. You know, Nicole, we spoke about all the books, and people have heard of Jean, and we spoke about the books that Jez has written, and I think a lot of people have heard of Jez. But you know what? It's your background that drives a lot of the statistical integrity, if that's a term, on these surveys. And I don't know if our audience is, I mean, they're familiar with Jean and Jez, but they may not be familiar with Nicole. Just quickly, your background in terms of how it relates to the research and the business model of Dora.
Sure. So my background is actually in industry. I was at IBM for several years. I was a consultant for several years. And then I decided to go get a PhD because I wanted to make sure I could understand in a generalizable way. Sorry, generalizable is such a research word. Basically, I wanted to make sure that the things that I found in one place or one organization or one team or several teams would be true for several teams or dozens of teams or hundreds of teams or thousands of teams, right? So we take a very strong research-based approach. So I do have a PhD, and I've been studying this for going on a decade now, and with the State of DevOps Reports, 4 years now.
Yeah.
So we do take a very, very strong, academically rigorous approach, and many of our findings have been published in peer review.
And that's important. And it actually goes to my next question, and that is, you know, we talk about the maturity models here. And you mentioned,
that's my favorite rant, you know, and Catherine brought that up. and Catherine knows this is one of my favorite rant, and sometimes I'll say, you know, a little bit sarcastically and sometimes, you know, snarkily, that maturity models are for chumps. And I say that with love, right? I say it with love because it's something that gives us, it's almost like a security blanket, right? Because it gives you something to strive for and to achieve for. The challenge is that once you have achieved this like predetermined level, all of your resources, whether that is time or energy or money at the organizational level, will magically disappear, right? So you have these maturity models that are predetermined, and who, first of all, who decided what that predetermined level was, right? Like, who said that that was even right? Someone made that up. Someone, let's be real, someone makes up maturity models. They're almost never data-driven, and then they've made it up, and then once you hit that magical level 5 or 4 or 7, all of the resources just disappear. And then that's a problem, because then what happens? The organization stops improving. And I've seen this time and time and time again, where an organization, like, they hit that level and then everything disappears. And my own work with the State of DevOps reports, if we had created a maturity model in 2014 when I started working on the State of DevOps reports, and we had said, this is what low performance, medium, and we did, this is low, this is medium, this is high, and we had called it a maturity model, then 2015, that model, if we called it a model, was out of date. In 2016, it was out of date. In 2017, it was out of date, because the industry gets better year over year over year over year. And if you sit on your laurels, you are left behind. I mean, tortoise in the hare, right? You are toast. And not only that, but the industry is getting better at faster and increasingly faster levels. And so if you decide that level 5 is your thing, and you set that target, and 2 years later you're like, we have arrived, and you sit back and you're just good, you are in so much trouble. And I love the way you say it, Catherine.
Oh, that they're at the same time both too specific and too general at the same time. Yes. Yeah, they are challenging. They do have their place. In some cases, when they're very specific and you are looking to get a sense of, okay, how are we at unit testing? Or security testing, or source code management, and really making sure that we're using, trunk-based development. It can have its place, just to kind of give yourself a rough sense of how far along are you in adopting, really mature practices. But I like what Nicole said, that ever since CMMI, when that big movement, we unfortunately rationalize why we are the level that we want to be at. And then we run around and create a lot of documentation to prove to ourselves that we are indeed, level 2 or level 3, wherever it is that you decided you wanted to be. And instead, what I like about Dora is it sets the tone for what we really want, which is we want a learning organization. We want a continuous improvement organization. We want to set targets that say we should be here, and this is where we want to be in terms of in ever increasing levels of maturity. And then also that it is adaptive, and it gives people a sense of priority, that what is a priority for my group and my team and my application may not be the same priorities for another organization, and that's okay. And that's
expected, right? Because my organization will have different weaknesses, and I say that in a loving, like, legit way, right? My weaknesses are different from your weaknesses. My opportunities for improvement will be different from your opportunities for improvement, will be different from Alan's opportunities for improvement.
Right. I work with some organizations where releasing once a quarter is just fine. It's fast enough, and that's good. And for some organizations, releasing once a week isn't nearly fast enough. Yeah. So we really need to have frameworks that that can accommodate that kind of adaptive business need and tie to business value.
Yeah. I mean, Catherine, I remember speaking to, it was a European organization, I don't remember, it might have been Maersk, the shipping line, and they went from releasing once a year to releasing every quarter. And you may think, well, releasing every quarter is no big deal, but that's a 400% improvement from where they were before. That is a big deal for them. Just quickly, we had a first question from our audience, and Nicole, for you, what were the customer profiles for the surveys?
I'm not totally sure what they mean by customer profiles. So,
it says, what customer profiles do the surveys cover?
So we collect data from all types of end users. When we do the Dora assessment, we collect primarily from what I say are the doers, right? So dev, test, ops, QA, InfoSec, including contractors, vendors, and consultants. When we do the State of DevOps report, we collect from everyone, and we prioritize analysis, again, on the doers.
Yeah. There's a misconception out there that DevOps is really only for greenfield applications or for startups, and that it doesn't really apply to legacy applications. And that's just categorically not true. There are, some of our largest, most conservative customers are investing heavily into DevOps, deep in the financial sector, in the healthcare sector. These are organizations that have to grapple with deep security, financial, and regulatory requirements, and they are embracing DevOps just as strongly. And including even within CA, our mainframe product development organization has gone through an agile and DevOps transformation to dramatically change how they develop products in a mainframe context. So it does apply across industry and across different kinds of applications.
And across architecture. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because we specifically asked about those types of greenfield, brownfield, legacy architectures in 2015, and we found that the type of architecture and the type of green, brown, legacy is not important, as long as you are using good architectural practices.
Yeah, I will tell you my own experience, at DevOps.com was when we first launched back in 2014 and planning in 2013. We have neighborhoods, right, where we kind of subject matter kind of, pooling. And originally, you're right, Catherine, people thought DevOps was a startup thing.
Right.
And that there was a difference somehow between what we called enterprise DevOps and just DevOps. And I always felt in my gut, in my heart, that there was no DevOps is DevOps.
Right.
And though we would all love to start with a blank piece of paper when we build our next infrastructure or our next company, life doesn't work that way.
Right.
And so there's a lot more brownfields than there are greenfields.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing that I have learned. Startups do DevOps from necessity because they don't have the silos, they don't have the structure yet, but they don't even realize why they're doing it, how they're doing it. There's not necessarily a rhyme or reason to their DevOps. It's necessity's the mother of invention. Where enterprises do generally adopt DevOps also out of necessity, but with a rhyme and reason generally, right? They pick their spots, they grow the teams, or they grow the projects that they're doing on, and they have the structure where you can experiment, where you can develop maturity models. There aren't many maturity models for startups, right? In terms of how they operate. So we see on DevOps.com, and just like CA, we see it in finance, we see it in retail, we see it in manufacturing, we see it in large enterprises. And where the action is in DevOps is in the enterprise. And increasingly, more and more in systems of record as well as systems of engagement. We'd all love to be 100% on the cloud. My company was born in AWS, and that's all I have. That's not reality, though, right? Nicole, you guys probably have some numbers on that, right? From the surveys, sort of cloud infrastructure versus on-prem with DevOps, so you don't?
No, we don't do that type of analysis. We tend to do more predictive analysis because that's what we're really interested in. We want to know what types of practices will drive improvement and deliver value to organizations.
Okay. I mean, we've just seen, and Catherine, I know CA has with your mainframe business, we see mainframe customers doing some pretty amazing things.
Yep, absolutely.
Utilizing DevOps and stuff like that.
Right.
Guys, let's move on.
I can't say that there are no significant differences between greenfield, brownfield, and legacy.
Yeah. Let's move on to our next question and our next area. Actually, before we do, it looks like we wow, we're starting to get a lot of questions now. This can get tricky. Hold on. So, Catherine, great question for you. How do you see frequently deploy in the financial industry? I mean, that was the question. I don't know if English was a second language here, but how do we see the financial industry doing frequent deploys?
Right. So with the financial industry, for those of you who may not be aware, is going through a massive amount of disruption and business disruption.
Yes.
And it's actually being compared to what happened in the aughts with the onset of e-commerce and Amazon, and how that forever changed the nature of retail. The nature of the financial industry is being changed in that fundamental way. And companies, financial companies have gone from a small handful of competitors that can fit on a single slide to literally hundreds and hundreds of competitors in tiny font. They can't fit it on a single slide anymore. And when you're thinking about how do you compete in that kind of environment that is changing that dramatically, you have to really prioritize. You've got this investment in financial applications, you've got Dodd-Frank, you've got financial oversight, you've got regulatory oversight, you've got risk and regulatory, you're holding large amounts of cash, so you can't just suddenly go, oh, okay, let's just push to production every single day, it'll be fine, we'll test in production, just like the startups do. And that's not really, it's not an appropriate way to go forward. And even the startups, we all kind of test in production, honestly, but that's a different topic. So in financial, it's really important to prioritize and to figure out where is appropriate risk. Where can I take more risk on, say, a mobile application and get it into the hands of my users and experiment and getting innovation out there faster, versus in my core business that moves money around, I want to take a much more conservative view towards change and frequency of change. So there's no end of work. You will never have enough time or money or people to ever finish the whole list of technical debt, and instead take a flow-based view and say what is slowing us down the most in the places where it matters the most, where going faster is crucial for our business to even be here in a year from now. So that's the important questions to be asking, is about prioritization.
Nicole, anything on that one?
Sure. In the data that we have seen coming in from financial firms, we see financial firms falling into all high, medium, and low performance profiles. So even though they are highly regulated, we do see many financial firms falling into high performers. So many of them are deploying on demand, which would be high performers. We do see some of them falling into that medium performer stack, which is deploying between once a week and once a month. Some of them are still struggling and kind of falling in that low performer, being a lot slower and deploying between once a month and once every 6 months.
And those won't be around long, I'm afraid. I mean,
they're struggling now. Even there, though, it's between once a month and once every 6 months. Now that's median, right? So there are still some that are really still only deploying like once a year. Those are the ones that are not going to be around long.
No. I mean, again, it's more subjective than objective, but to me, this is what's changing the financial industry right here. Right? I've spoken to dozens of financial institutions, many at Gene's DevOps Enterprise Summit, everyone from ING to Her Majesty's Tax Service. I've spoken to the South African Revenue, their version of the IRS. I've spoken to literally dozens of banks. They're not investing in brick and mortar banks anymore. Banking today is being conducted via apps.
Yeah, because being a bank is no longer what sets you apart is no longer how well you hide gold bars in a safe.
No.
It's how well you can move bits and how well you can service customers and how easy it is for your customers to do things easily, quickly, and deposit checks over the phone and set up a bank account over the phone and
move their money around for them, give them access. I mean, and this is a worldwide phenomenon. As I said, I've spoken to banks in Poland, in the Netherlands. The bank in the Netherlands, and I don't want to mention names right here, but they handle about 40% of all the payroll that's done in the Netherlands. Mainframe, obviously, back end, right, with that kind of infrastructure. But you know what? They're investing a ton into DevOps in both, not only their back end systems of record, right, but in their front ends as well. People want to know.
And Dora has worked with them.
Right.
So you know who I'm talking about then. Yeah. I mean, and that's just one. There's literally dozens of them. As a matter of fact, I would say between the retail industry and the financial services industry, I see more innovation and more kind of pushing the envelope with DevOps than I see even in IT organizations, with tech-related companies.
And that's, and yeah.
Go ahead, Catherine. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's why it's really important that companies learn how to prioritize. That there's way more than they can do.
Yes.
And what they don't need is yet another product company or yet another industry article telling them what practices they should be embracing. Their list is already way too long. Yes. I kind of liken it to, I live in a 100-year-old house, which is old for California, and the honey-do list and the list of things that we can improve or fix is way more money and time and energy than we will ever have. So I don't need yet another person coming in and telling me, oh, you should fix this and overhaul this piece and change this. And that's how CIOs feel these days, is that they're really actually being called upon to do more with less. So they need a framework to figure out what's the next best thing to work on. What is really impacting my ability to develop software with both speed as well as reliability, that it's not just enough to push from dev to prod quickly, that your code has to be reliant and performant and secure and operable and all the ilities. And that's what I really like about Dora. Is that it examines all ends of the DevOps spectrum, not just the speed aspects, as well as there are cultural aspects that get in the way of companies really being high-performant organizations, and Dora calls that out. And that can be really uncomfortable. And people don't expect to have a survey that's broad and comprehensive, and you have to be prepared to get an answer that maybe you didn't expect to hear, or to be given a task and say, this is really important for you to work on, and it's not going to be your favorite thing.
Excellent. Hey, another quick question. This one's for Nicole. Quick question for Nicole. Is Dora an assessment of individuals' mindset within the team to determine how they see DevOps, or is it an organizational or team level? Do you guys also work with teams at the coaching level?
So this is an individual level assessment, and it's not of their mindset. It is an assessment of, it's several questions. It takes 15 to 20 minutes, and we cover all aspects of about 24 key capabilities that are predictive of DevOps success.
Great. Let me knock some of these, because we're building up quite a backlog of questions. For Catherine and Nicole, do you see any significant difference in DevOps uptake between sectors? And maybe you can comment specifically on the telecom sector, where the vendors don't typically have any control over the deployment of code into an operator's network.
Yeah, and so it depends. I don't know about what Nicole's saying, but I do see, specifically that there are different practices that certain industries kind of gravitate towards, and it's not even industry. It's really it has more to do with the nature of the applications. So, like I was saying, HR and financial applications, regardless of industry, tend to take a more conservative approach. They really prefer to work more on their structured processes for moving change through, as well as the operability of their code, and so they do tend to focus on those practices. While other kinds of applications, like especially those that are customer facing, are really focusing much more on the speed of deployment, that they're really trying to take that lead time from when they have a change that they want to make, how fast can they get it through their deployment pipelines and processes and testing processes and get it into their customers' hands. Nicole, I'll let you comment.
Sure. We do see a bit of a disconnect sometimes in certain industries like telecom, but we're definitely seeing a lot of transformation within telecom as well.
Excellent. Catherine, this one I think is more maybe for you. What do you see, Catherine, as the key ingredients for an ideal DevOps maturity model?
So first of all, I'm not a fan of maturity models for DevOps either. I think DevOps maturity, to encompass all that is DevOps, or too often I hear people misconceive DevOps is your deployment tool chain. That how do you go from checked in code to put into production, and they forget the feedback loops back from operations back into your deployment pipelines and into your code management. They forget about all that goes into operating your code, and they certainly forget their processes as well as their cultural aspects. So that's why I'm not really a fan of a DevOps maturity model, because it's too much and it's too comprehensive. What I see as the key ingredient is to draw from my background, which is Agile, and helping customers through large-scaled agile transformations and learning to create adaptive roadmaps where on a quarterly basis you constantly examine where were you, what have you accomplished, what value have you been able to achieve because you've made these changes, not making the change for change's sake, and what's the next best step to take. So learning how to use adaptive agile planning to plan your transformation is really, I think, the key ingredient.
Nicole, anything on that one? Key ingredients for an ideal maturity model?
I think there are a couple things. One is good, consistent measurement that you know will allow you to understand where you are now and benchmark, both against yourself and against some type of reference group, because the research shows that benchmarks are good keys for motivation. Another one is a nice holistic measure. And then the last is something that allows you to prioritize. Because again, right, it's always like death by priority, death by list. There's just so much to do right now because we are working in complex systems. And the ability to prioritize again and again over time is super important because, again, we are working in complex systems. And anytime you fix one or two things, like you can't come up with a list of 10 things and knock off 3 and then think that item number 4 is going to be item number 4. Because once you've knocked off those first 3, everything will reshuffle. So you have to be able to reassess and reprioritize.
Great. One more question, I think, here for Nicole. Nicole, can you give our audience an example of what are some of the topics that the assessment covers and what sort of level of depth does it go into?
Sure. So the broad categories include cultural, and we cover like 3 or 4 types of things in cultural categories. So like we cover the Westrum organizational culture because that one has been shown to be highly predictive of both IT performance, that ability to deliver code with both speed and stability, and overall organizational performance. We cover job satisfaction, which is a particular type of job satisfaction. Excuse me. We also cover a category of technical and automation, and we cover several types of technical and automation, like deployment automation, use of version control, continuous integration, automated testing, and then we cover, security, shifting left on security. Here, I'm totally gonna like pull this up right now.
So I'll jump.
There are like 24 in here, right? Trunk-based development, having a loosely coupled architecture, having empowered teams, test data management. Then we have a section on process control. So within process control, it's working across the value stream, working in small batches, allowing for team experimentation, automating your change approval process. And then we have measurement and monitoring. And with measurement and monitoring, that category has things like having a monitoring process that's also integrated into business decisions, having a proactive failure notification process, having WIP limits, having visualizations. Now, how deep does it go? Each of those areas is captured by several questions. So when I say having a measurement process that's very accurate, so these are all psychometric constructs. So it's not like the CI question, right? Continuous integration. The question is not, do you do continuous integration, or do you think continuous integration is good? That is such a loaded question, right? Like I could never ask that question. CI is actually captured by 4 or 5 questions. For example, it's something like, when you check in code, does it automatically trigger a series of automated tests? And like how much, right? Like all the time, never, right? And it's like a sliding scale. You know, when you check in code, does it trigger a set of automated builds, right? So it's 4 or 5 of those that everyone can answer. And it's not like I'm looking for 11% versus 12%. No, right? I'm looking for like a general sense of how much this is happening. And then we combine those in kind of a proprietary scalar weighted percentage way. And then we pull those together. And then you ask me like, how much? So we pull all those together, you get kind of an idea of how much all of those are happening. And then you can go back into a knowledge base, because then the knowledge base also lets you dig into, you get a score for CI. And you're like, I'm surprised. I thought I was doing the CI. I'm not doing the CI. Because so often, and it's funny because I go back to Jez, and Jez is like, everyone thinks they're doing CI, no one's doing CI. Because everyone thinks CI is only like one or two things. Well, for CI to be predictive of software development delivery with both speed and stability, it needs to actually have these 4 or 5 components. So then you can dig into the knowledge base and you can see, oh, okay, here's why it's important, common mistakes, ways to improve. So you can all dig in and you can say, oh, I'm missing this piece. Or, oh, I'm kind of doing it, but I'm not doing it in fluency. Like, I'm not doing it when stuff hits the fan, right? So I need to be doing all of it. And we have this knowledge base built out for like all 20-something key capabilities. So we go into detail, right, for all of it, for all the pieces. And that's why when I say, like, if we like roll back the tape and you say who takes the survey, it's the doers, right? I don't need executives taking the survey because they aren't going to know in detail when these things are happening and to what level and how often and how likely we are to do this. So that's, I guess, maybe that's the best way to answer that question.
Excellent.
That's how we collect the data.
Great. Catherine, I'd like to, this was a question that came from the audience, but it actually triggers something that I wanted to get into. And I want to talk a little bit about this partnership now. So I think we understand a little bit about what Nicole and the Dora team are doing.
Right.
I think people know who CA technology is for the most part.
Right.
What's the nuts and bolts here? How is CA going to use the Dora technologies, the Dora ways, and how is that helping CA? How is it helping CA's customers?
Yeah, so first of all, the biggest thing that we really want to be helping our customers with, and for those of you who don't know, CA Technology, we create the products that help power the modern software factory. So, and we have a range of products that go from planning and to your development, your testing, and your operations, as well as your mainframe and security. So we have probably one of the broadest tool sets in the of almost any company in the industry, and we have a deep appreciation for the struggles our customers have prioritizing, as well as connecting these things that they know they should do to invest in their craft of making really good software and connecting that to business value. And that's really important. And our customers struggle, and therefore, we struggle alongside them to connecting these things that we know are really good, like making sure that you shift left on security and that you find your security vulnerabilities as early as possible in your development cycle and using automated means, not a checklist. And then how do you connect that to business value? And this is where Dora comes in, because now we can connect the dots between your ability to shift left on security, for example, and making sure that you're developing code not just with speed. What gets in the way and slows down your overall chain are these late discovered security vulnerabilities, and what does that mean for your business and your overall business value, or the value to your company in terms of the product they produce, as well as being able to attract and retain top talent. We know that companies that invest in these kinds of practices have happier employees that stay longer, that they advocate for the company in social settings, and they advocate for the company as a place to work, as well as for the product sets. So
and
we know that there's
the last 2 years, right? Companies that invest in all of these capabilities that we have just shown, their employees are 2.2 times more likely to recommend their organization as a great place to work.
Right. So for us, it's being able to tie all those pieces together for our customers, that we aren't just yet another company in pushing yet another tool, that we care deeply about the outcomes for our clients and customers. And Dora is a great way to help companies discover and create those connections and advocate for these really solid practices with their business owners and deepen those investments.
Certainly better than, so go ahead, Nicole.
So there's one last piece that Dora does that I haven't had a chance to talk about yet that I think that's really exciting. So Dora goes through and we measure all of the capabilities. We can also report out a score for all of our customers and clients. We can benchmark against the industry and the industry high performers. The last piece that we can do, and Catherine and I have hinted at it, but I haven't talked about it directly. We've talked about prioritization and how important that is, right? Because we're all drowning in a million things to do. What we can do once I have all of this data is that I can algorithmically tell an organization what is most important for them. I can identify for them what their constraint is. So, said another way, I can tell you what your priorities are in terms of capability development. So all of these things I just said in terms of culture, automation, process, and metrics. I can say what top 3 or 4 things you should work on to accelerate your transformation. I can identify your priorities.
Yeah, that cannot be overstated enough times. That prioritization, is often done in what we jokingly refer to as decibel levels. It's whoever's yelling the loudest.
And it's algorithmically, Right. It's not decibel levels. It's not. Right. It's not, this is my favorite thing, right? It's not like, oh, I like culture, so it's culture. It's not, someone likes release engineering, so it's release engineering. It's not, someone likes process and agile, so it's process. It's algorithmically data-driven, evidence-based. This is what you should focus on. And I think this is also where the partnership with CA is so compelling and so strategic, is that because CA has such a full suite of tools and professional services, and they have such a strong commitment to their customer, they can address any of the priorities that are algorithmically identified, vendor and tool agnostic. They can address with an eye to the customer what's important to really accelerate that transformation so that they can deliver value.
Yep.
And that's why Dora is excited about the partnership.
Right. Thank you.
Cool. Here, I've got a question from Eric in the audience, and it brings up something that we haven't touched on. That is, when we talk about our assessments and maturity models, etc., he said there's one important category missing, and that is data. Eric's company organization faces issues with the quality of their data, and more importantly, the quality of their data definitions. Is this an important part of DevOps, and does it increase your ability to increase velocity? Catherine, maybe do you want to?
Yeah, so there's 2 aspects to that. One, so there is a whole series of questions around test data, if that's what you're talking about, and that is a core capability. So we do go deep on that data. So that one does come up as far as an impact and whether or not it's a prioritization. But you probably bring up a different, more broader topic, which is this notion of being a data-driven company. And we have all these metrics that drive us. And are we making good decisions based on bad, are we making bad decisions based on good data, or good decisions based on bad data? Where do we fit in our decision making, being the data-driven company? And this is data, so we should be driven by it, right? And there's a lot of that going on for our customers. And so part of what we do with the Dora assessment and within CA is we help customers focus in on a smaller subset of metrics that truly matter, that the ones that we find have the biggest impact on IT performance, like we were talking about. It's not just speed, it's also stability. And there's a small subset of really key metrics, and that CA tools can help you figure out what is your metric, and then talk about, well, what's your confidence in that data? Every single customer I've talked to has some amount of skepticism and doubt as to the accuracy of the data that's coming out of their tools. And that's normal. And so part of your question is, well, why is that? And of course, you do want to improve the data, but you don't want to be making decisions based on just data. You do want to use something like this survey to augment and complement what the data is telling you, as well as a 3-pronged approach. So having an independent observer also kind of give you some feedback. Somebody who's not invested in your organization and part of your organizational culture, I can take 3 steps back and look at customers and give them a sense of pattern. Yep, we see this all the time. It's really normal. And as well as maybe where what they're hearing or what they think they're hearing isn't what people are saying. And the biggest disconnect we see is in the DevOps arena, and especially with Nicole hit on it, continuous integration. The executives think everything's fine, and then the doers feel all the pain for what it takes to move code from dev to test. And so we often see a very large disconnect in perception of capabilities in those areas. So you really need all of that to complement this notion of data and being data-driven. And Nicole, I'll let you comment.
Sure. So Eric, I think you may be touching on why are we getting data from a survey and not from the system itself. So I'm thrilled you asked that question because I was hoping I'd have a chance to address it. So my background is actually in systems. I was a hardware and a systems engineer for a long time, and that's where I used to get all of my data. So here's why we do the assessment with survey data and not systems data. One reason is that it's the best way to get fast data very, very quickly. It also allows us to triangulate. Getting systems data can be really difficult because it's hard to get full data out of a system very quickly. So if you think about it, if we want to get data out of like our entire stack and our entire system, we have to get it out of like our entire version control system and our entire CI system and our entire pipeline and our entire test data system and our entire security system and our entire value stream and our entire agile system and our entire everything and the entire stack for that entire system. And if we miss even one tiny, tiny slice, we could miss where massive performance degradations are being introduced. And we would then miss visibility into all of that. And you might be like shaking your head thinking, no, she's crazy. But I used to work on hardware performance systems, and we thought we had instrumented the entire stack, and everything looked amazing. And then by asking a handful of our customers, we realized that like we had actually missed instrumenting a tiny, tiny, tiny slice of the stack, but that tiny slice was introducing all of the performance degradations. And by asking people general questions, that pointed us to where we could look. And so system data is super important. It's absolutely important, but by asking very smart, carefully constructed questions, which is what we've been doing. It's been based on 4 years of very carefully constructed research-based data. So I'm doing this very carefully. These are not normal research questions, right? Like these are academically constructed research questions. This will give us pointers. This will tell us where to go look in the system data. So yes, system data is super important, but the survey data and the system data go together. And that's why we use survey data, is because it allows us to get to the data very, very, very quickly. We can run the entire assessment start to finish, the entire process, starting to talk to a customer, delivering reports in 2 to 4 weeks for a global, international global firm in 2 to 4 weeks. Imagine how long that would take to get an entire set of system metrics together, synthesized, analyzed, reported on, right? Like there's no way. We can't do that in 2 to 4 weeks.
Right.
So that's why we use this type of data.
I'd like to bring one other aspect of data into the conversation, and Catherine, it may very well be a CA question, and that is, you know, in the age of big data, we're drowning in our data. Many of these large organizations don't know what to do with their data. They don't know what their data is. And so
I do metrics workshops for this.
There you go. I mean, maybe that's the answer. How do we separate the quality from the noise, right, and turn that signal ratio down? It's hard, right? And that's part of this. You can't go fast, right? You know, you can't go fast till you got that kind of down a little bit.
Well, and part of it requires a little bit, you know, metrics workshops are good, but it also requires a little bit of humility. I can't tell you how many times I've shown a continuous integration dashboard to a manager that should understand what's going on and what it means to be looking at about check-in stats and change ratios, and, you know, what is happening SHA by SHA, and then they kind of nervously look, yeah, I should know what she's talking about, and I really don't. And so we don't slow down enough to explain what this data means, and then we also don't ask ourselves some really important questions about this data. And then the first one is, you know, what decisions can I really make about it? A lot of this data is, it's informational, or it's great because it's diagnostic, but diagnostic data is not good decision-making data. So then we try to do crazy things like, so then we try to take these, It's exploratory, and so then we try and do crazy things like create these red, yellow, green dashboards and ranges, and then we don't use, as Nicole and I have ranted before about good mathematical principles about stratifying your data. So they do it incorrectly because they are really awesome at pivot tables in Excel. And then or they use worse average where it's not meant to be used, so they don't understand fundamental statistical principles of analyzing data. So I see this a lot in customers again and again, and short of taking them back through those kinds of mathematical principles, instead I find that I have to kind of convince them, okay, wait a minute, you need to let go, you need to focus on a few of them, and what decisions can you make from it? And then the other thing to be asking yourself is, what's the level of effort to get these metrics? We sometimes try and grab onto, my favorite one is traceability. It is such a low ROI metric. It takes tremendous amount of work and effort to tie all your systems together. And what did it really tell you? What it probably told you is you should be finding your defects sooner and testing earlier. Duh. Almost all of us could work on that. So what is the return on investment on some of these metrics is the other big question to be asking yourself.
Fair enough. I'm sorry to be taking us down all these rabbit holes, but I'm trying to stay up with the audience. Here's another good topic, juicy topic to sink into, and this question comes to us from Prasant. And in large enterprises, typically, he calls them shadow IT. It's not really my definition of shadow IT, but he's referring to external vendors who are involved in the value chain of software delivery. And how do you account for them, this shadow IT or third party versus the in-house teams? And in an ideal DevOps environment, is there a place for them, and if so, what is that role?
Right.
Either one of you?
The answer is
yeah, it does. And so part of what we do in our partnership with Dora is that we work with our customers to figure out who are the best people to take the survey. And we really focus on making sure that we get the broadest spectrum possible. So we make sure it's developers, it is your QA, it is your operations people, it is your security people, it is your product managers. And there's probably some others that are worked into that. And as part of that conversation and figuring out who are the best people to take the survey, we absolutely will ask questions about partners and either shadow IT or outsourcing vendors, remote development teams. There's a tendency to only want to focus on those that are part of your onshore development teams or those that you can see at your main headquarters. And really, in some organizations, it is crucial to make sure that your offshore or nearshore teams are also included as part of the survey. So it depends, and that answering that question is really, really important to get good survey results.
Yes.
Nicole, anything to add?
What she said.
Okay, I'm with her.
CA is a certified partner. She knows all of it.
She's got all that down.
Yeah,
so let me ask the reverse. Who should not be answering these questions in the organization?
Executives.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's that disconnect that I was talking about, that it's really important and it's very eye-opening for executive teams to find out what their people really think. And what's really plaguing their people. We have a tendency to focus on kind of the annual employee opinion survey, and we know that data set, it's too lagging. It really is highly influenced what happened recently for that employee and their experience, and therefore not indicative of their entire year's worth of experience. We also encounter cultures where people, they answer the way they think the manager wants to be answered, because it's internal and it's tracked, and so they're like, okay, I'll give everybody 10, 10, 10. And so it's hard to get really good candid answers. And what I like about Dora is that it gives a safer space for your individual contributors to tell the truth, to really tell their truth about what's going on for them.
It's fully anonymous. It's not tracked. We don't collect IP. You could hunt me down and try to get me to track it back to a person, and there's no way I could. It's fully anonymous.
And that's really important. Yeah, and then as far as who shouldn't take it, or who should, what organization should, what I usually tell organizations is don't take this if what you're looking for is just another assessment to kind of go, oh, okay, here's what we're doing, and hope that they get some, some free advice. That really, to commit to doing this Dora assessment is really starting to commit to that path of continuous improvement, and to take a much more holistic view of your DevOps transformation journey. And if you're not really prepared to deal with what the results tell you, and you're not really prepared to start to commit to a more capability-oriented transformation path versus maturity model, then hold off and spend time getting your organization ready, getting your executives ready, the sponsorship ready, and really start to think about what do we need in place to take action on this. Don't just take it and have it sit in the drawer. It would be a waste of your time.
Nicole, for the Dora assessment, what KPIs are considered? Another question.
What do you mean by that?
So how does the Dora assessment help you to have consistent measurements? What KPIs are considered?
Okay, so the report focuses in on that ability to deliver software with both speed and stability. And then what we do when you engage with a partner is that partner will help tie that IT performance construct to organization-specific KPIs, because KPIs are always organization and context specific.
Got it. Guys, believe it or not, we have like 4 or 5 minutes only left.
Oh, we're at time.
We didn't even finish
Has it been an hour?
question.
Yeah,
it has. I'm
time
sorry.
flies. Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun, when you're talking metrics and assessments.
We can do it another time. We'll do it another time. We could do these anytime, but I want to use our remaining time, wrap up. People who may be interested say, hey, this sounds great. I'd like to look into it. I'd like to, maybe I'm a CA existing customer, maybe I'm not. Catherine, how can people, if they're interested, in doing this, how can they contact you guys or work with Dora and CA?
Right. So I believe we had a slide that we were going to share at the end that has a link where you can go and click through and request more information. We do have some information that we can share with you all about the impact of DevOps, as well as the State of DevOps Report. So we're happy to share that with folks to learn more, as well as I believe Nicole and I think we posted our Twitter. There's also going to be a follow-up email that's going to go out to everybody that attended this, and that'll have links and information and contact information for you to find out more.
Okay, I'm getting a note from Web Engineer Central here that this will go out in the follow-up mail. Evidently, we weren't able to pop it on the screen, so I apologize. But we will be able to get that. And Nicole, I know Jez, you guys are out busy evangelizing.
Yep, we're out and about.
Thing. Where are you going to be in the near future?
In the near future, I'm out and about, and I will be at CA World. I'm super excited to be there, and I'll be speaking.
As will I.
As will I.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And CA World, I think, is it October 16th?
November. It's November.
November 16th.
It's November, yep. So I'll be
in Las Vegas.
Yep, in Las Vegas, and I'll be at DevOps Enterprise Summit. So.
Right, that same week in San Francisco. So
yep,
yes,
I'm sure Catherine and I will pass each other on planes as we're passing off the baton.
Yep. Fortunately, it's only an hour flight between the two, so yeah, and they happen hourly. Yep. Exactly.
Right.
So we'll be at both of those. Yep.
It's going to be a busy
Yep. And in 2 weeks, I'll be up at a conference called Agile Camp in Portland with Gene, as a matter of fact, talking about Agile and DevOps, and especially about what we see as kind of the future of the converging of the two movements.
Right. And this week I'm at DevOps Day's Dallas Leadership Summit, I guess next week on Monday.
Excellent. A lot going on with the Agile and DevOps kind of coming together.
Yeah. Yep.
We'll talk about it. Anyway, guys, we're about out of time. So let me wrap up, first of all, by thanking both Catherine and Nicole for appearing here today as our guests.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is a format we kind of are experimenting with. I was things seem to work well. Let's hope they finish well.
Yes, my voice almost held up, so sorry, everyone.
No, you did great.
I'm
I'm just sitting here saying, okay, it's good. Next, we will have this recorded. It'll be up shortly. We'll have the follow-up. Thank you to everyone who stood in for the hour, and especially to all those people who asked such great questions.
Yeah, they were great questions. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Really
everyone.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
Cole, Catherine, thank you. This
Bye.
is Alan Schimmel
Bye.
for DevOps.com. We'll see you
Bye.
soon on another
Thanks,
webinar
everyone.
or video. Bye-bye
Bye.
now.